Okay, to begin with, we're going to set up our spreadsheet so that it's as easy to use as possible, and I'll mention a couple of handy Excel shortcuts as we do it. You might want to have the video open at the top of your screen and your own Excel file open at the bottom, or you might want to split it on the left and the right, rather than clicking between them. For that reason, I've zoomed in quite a lot in my own data file, which is fine as we don't need to see all the data. As you follow along, you may find you want to slow down or speed up the YouTube video. You can do that by hovering over the video and clicking the settings button. This video is going to look at some Excel skills rather than actual stats, and so if you're not interested in that, you can jump ahead and use the tidied data file. However, the Excel skills that we look at are quite general and will be valuable at some point in the future, so I recommend you work through this video and tidy the data file yourself. First of all, click somewhere in the data and do Ctrl and A. This should have selected all of our data as long as there are no blank rows or columns, and we can quickly scroll across to check that it's captured everything. Once you've done that, go to Data, click on Filter. We've now applied a filter to our sheet, and we can see that from the arrows at the top here. We can use these arrows to select or deselect particular values or to sort our data. For example, if we wanted to just look at those with the title Doctor, we can do that here. Click there, deselect all, and then just choose Doctor, click OK, and we just get the doctors. We can then get rid of that filter by clicking Clear, and we go back to normal. What's also really useful is that this menu shows us all the different values in that column. For example, out of the 2000 rows, the only different reasons for people taking part are these ones here. Next, use Ctrl and Home to go back to the top left cell. Now click on View, Freeze Panes, and freeze the top row. Now, if you try to scroll down, you can see that our top row is always frozen and visible wherever we are. That's really handy. Next, use Ctrl and Right to jump to the far right column. Now the data we were given contains each person's sugar intake in January and in February, but it doesn't tell us how much that person reduced their sugar intake. So let's calculate that for each person. We're going to do that in column L. Let's give it a sensible name, perhaps sugar reduction. Hit enter, and in cell L2 we're going to do a calculation and say that this cell is equal to this number, take away that number. So if we start by writing equals, we can click on that cell, take away, click on the next cell, and then when we hit enter, it will do the calculation for us. Okay, that is the answer to 1500, take away 553, so it's done it correctly. We can quickly apply that to the whole column. If we click on that cell, double click on this little square that appears at the bottom right corner, that's now gone all the way down, and we can check that it's gone all the way down by pressing Ctrl and down. That'll take us to the bottom of the list. Now, unfortunately, this new column isn't captured by the filter that we'd applied. We can see that as it doesn't have the drop-down arrow. So we're going to have to remove the filter. Go to Data, click on the filter, select all the data again using Ctrl and A, and we can reapply the filter, and now that's captured our new column. If we create a new column at the end of our table, it will be missed out of our filter like it was there. However, if we were to create a new column in the middle, for example between columns I and J, then that would be included in the filter, so it's always handier to do it that way. If we just sort this formatting out down here as well, let's make this column a bit wider and center align it like we have all the other columns. There we go. If you haven't saved your file yet, now would be a good time to do so. It's a read-only file at the moment, so you won't be able to save over it. So if you go to File, Save As, you can then choose where you want to save it. Next up, we're going to look at column G, our Family Friends column. Remember that 1 means yes, a family member or friend was also taking part, whilst 0 means no, nobody close to them was taking part. Rather than ugly 1s and 0s, we're going to turn these into yeses and nos instead. It's quite quick and simple to do. First of all, let's quickly check that we only have ones and zeros in the column. Yep, we're good. First, let's create a new column for our yeses and nos. We right-click on column H and click Insert. We'll get a new column to the left. We'll give it a new name. Let's give it the same name that we had before, family/friends. Now we're going to use what's called an if statement in this cell H2. It's quite a simple concept. If a certain condition is met, H2 will be filled with one thing. If the condition isn't met, the cell will be filled with another. We're going to say equals, and we always start a formula with equals. If, open brackets, cell G1 equals 1, comma, then yes. Note that that goes in quotation marks, comma. Otherwise, no. Again in quotation marks. Close the brackets and then hit enter. Note that we had to put yes and no in quotation marks because these are, according to Excel, strings or words. If we want to put any words anywhere, we have to use quotation marks. If we wanted to get just another number out of it, we wouldn't have had to put those in quotes. If we double click on the square, as we did before, that will apply all the way down the column. We can do some quick checks to make sure that that's worked. All the zeros line up with no's and all the ones line up with yeses. Now this column is what we would call a live column. It's still tied to column G here. So if I were to change that to a 0, this value here changes to no. Sometimes that can be really useful, but because our data isn't changing, we don't need this column to be live. And the fact that it contains lots of formulas can slow Excel down. If you click on a cell, you can see that it contains the formula by looking up here. Now, if we right-click on this column, click on copy, right-click on it again, and we're going to paste as values this button here. Now what that's done is it's turned all of these formulas into values. Now you can see there aren't any formulas there now, just the yeses and nos. That'll speed things up. We can now delete that ugly column of ones and zeros. And actually, we've still got a live column at the end, haven't we? Our sugar reduction column is still made up of J take away K. Now we can do what we did there. Right click, copy. Right click, paste as values. And those formulas will disappear too. There are lots of quicker ways to do the replacing that we did in that column there, but if statements are really important in Excel, and so it was a good example of using an if statement in quite a simple context. Next up, we're going to have a play with our age column. At the moment, we are given participants' raw age, which will definitely come in handy later on. However, there will also be times when it will be more useful to have people in age bands or groups, so we're going to create those now. First of all, it will be useful to know what the minimum and maximum ages are. So if we select the whole age column and look down at this green bar at the bottom right, you'll see some information. Now at the moment, yours might not display the minimum and maximum, but if you right click on the green bar, you can toggle to turn on and off what you want to see. We can see that our participants' ages range from a minimum of 18 up to a maximum of 82. So we can choose some sensible age bands based on these. Now the next step is to create a table to tell Excel which age bands to attach to each age. Let's do that in a new sheet. We're going to give this new sheet a sensible name. If we right click, rename as age bands, hit enter. And while we're at it, we can give the original sheet a name as well. Let's right click it, rename, we'll call it data. Now in our age sheet, we're going to have a list of ages from 18 all the way down to 82. Now if I start typing my list, select what I've written so far and scroll down, you can see that Excel is guessing what we want to put in there. Sometimes this is really useful and it gets it right, but sometimes it misunderstands what we want to do and it gets it wrong. So always look out for that. We're taking this all the way down to 82, so use that dot, scroll it down till you get to 82. In the next column, we're going to write corresponding age bands for each age. Now, my first group is going to be 18 to 25, so I'll put that in there, copy it using Control and C, and paste it into the rest of the 18 to 25s. I'm then going to go up in tens from there, so I'm going to have 26 to 35, copy that. However, you don't have to follow these exact groupings. You can do whatever you like, but these are groups that are quite commonly used. So fill your groups out from the top to the bottom. Now for my last group, I'm just going to have a 66 plus, rather than going 66 to 75 and then up. You can choose a higher cutoff point. You don't have to have a cutoff point like that if you don't want to, but that's what I'm going to do. Once we've filled out our table, we're going to select the whole table and go to the top left box to give it a name. Let's call it Age Table, or something sensible that you'll remember, and hit Enter. If we go back to the main tab, in this tab we're going to create a new column for our age bands. Let's do this next to age. We right click on column E, insert, and call our new column Age Bands. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to tell Excel to read the age here, look it up in this column here, return the number that's in this column here. We're going to use a formula called a VLOOKUP for that. Now if we type equals VLOOKUP, open brackets, so we're going to look up this number, comma, we're going to look it up in age table, comma, we want it to return the thing that's in the second column of age table, comma, and for this bit here, just pop in false. Close the brackets. Once you've written that out, hit enter. Now does this look correct? 66 is in the 66 plus group, so far so good. If we double click apply all the way down, we can do some quick checks. 21 is in 18 to 25, it looks like that's worked. Now, as we did before, we're going to remove the live values from this column. So if we right click, copy, right click again, paste as values, the formulas have disappeared. Now, if we want to get rid of this glowing thing here, click escape and that will stop. Now, we noted in the intro video that some of the columns have missing data, and we can flick through the filter arrows to see where those blanks are. Now, in fact, it is just two columns that have blanks. That's the gender column and the social media interactions column. Now, if we just look at the blank genders, deselect that and click on blanks, we can see down here that there are 70 of them. 70 of our 2,000 records are blank. Now these blanks are due to participants not selecting their gender when they filled out their details. 70 blanks out of 2,000 isn't disastrous, but we may be able to use the title column to infer or to work out these people's genders. To do that, we're going to use a bigger if statement. It would actually be possible to use a VLOOKUP, like we did just now, but bigger if statements are really useful too. Now at the moment we've still got a filter applied. We can see that because these numbers here have turned blue. We need to clear that filter. Now we know that that filter is just in the gender column, so we can click on it, click on clear filter there. Another way to do it would be to click on clear next to the filter button up here, and we're back to normal. We're going to create two new columns, so right click and insert, do that twice. We'll call the first one gender 2 and the second one gender 3. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to say if the title is Mrs. or Miss or Ms, then the gender is female. If the title is Mr, then the gender is male. And if it's Doctor, then we're not going to be sure. So let's do that if statement now. Equals if, open brackets. So if that cell equals Mrs, again in quotation marks, comma, female, comma. Now in the next bit, we can do another if statement. So we're going to say, otherwise, if, open brackets, that cell equals Miss, comma, female, comma. And then the next one, if, open brackets, that cell equals Ms, female. If that cell, so we can just type E2 instead of clicking on the cell, if E2 equals Mr, then male, in quotation marks. And finally, this is the bit where we can say, for any other situation, what do we want to say? We want to say unknown. So this doesn't go inside a new if statement. This is kind of the end of all of the if statements. Now we need to close all the brackets that we've created. If we don't get the right number of brackets and we hit enter, Excel will prompt us, but we've got it right there. Now if we copy that all the way down, we can see whether our formula's worked or not. Mr has come out as male, everything else coming out as female, looks good. We've got a couple of unknowns there, but that's Doctor. So that's, I think, the only situation that we didn't cover. We covered Mr, Mrs, Miss, so just Doctor there. So it makes sense that those are coming out as unknowns. However, we actually know some of these genders from the original gender column. These unknowns here, we know they are both males. And for some others we will do as well. For this unknown here, we know that's a female. And so actually what we're going to do in gender 3 is we're going to combine these two gender columns together. So I only want to use column C when column B is blank. That's the only time that we need to use this one. So we're going to say in cell D1 equals if, open brackets, cell B2 is blank, so equals, and then just do a pair of empty quotation marks, comma. If that cell is blank, use the value from cell C2, comma. If it's not blank, if that's false, then just use the value from B2. Close your brackets, hit enter, and we can apply that all the way down. So the only time that this cell is being populated is when this one is blank, and in that case it uses the value from this column. And so we shouldn't have any blanks down here. So this cell was blank, we've got female there though, and so it's come out as female here. These two were unknown in column C, but because column B wasn't blank, it took the male values from there anyway. If we right click on this now, copy and paste those values over themselves, we've got rid of our live columns. If we delete the two kind of workings gender columns, just get left with our one gender column, change the title back to gender, and we can actually see how many unknowns we're left with now. If we just select the unknowns, great, we've only got 5 unknowns left, and these are people who had blank gender columns and had the title of Doctor, so there's no way we can infer their gender from that. We didn't know what to do with them. If we clear that filter, we're ready to move on. At this point, if you haven't already done so, then save your work again. And next up, we're going to have a look at the missing social media interaction values. Now, these are a bit of a mystery. We don't know why this data is missing. Would it be sensible to assume that these blanks are zeros? Probably not, because there's no reason to believe this, and there are already zeros in the data, and so putting zeros in here would be guessing and would mess up our data quite a bit if it was wrong. Now the best thing to do is to replace the blanks with some kind of code to say that they're unknown. Now we don't want to do this with the entire column, because if we did so, we'd get all the blanks right at the bottom as well underneath our data. So what we're going to do is, if you click in the bottom cell and click on Control, Shift and Up, that will just select the whole column from this cell upwards. Next up, we're going to do Control and F, which is for find, and then we're going to choose Replace. Now we're just going to replace blanks, so we can leave this top box blank. We're going to replace it with the word unknown. Click on Replace All, and Excel tells us that it's replaced the 164 blanks that we had in that column. Click on OK and close. If we scroll up, we can see that there are some unknowns appearing there. Save your work again. The very last thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up what's called a pivot table for our data set. Pivot tables are one of the most powerful features in Excel, and once you get to grips with how they work, they will make some of our analysis much faster. If we choose a cell anywhere in our table, go to Insert and click on Pivot Table. Check that all of our data has been included in this highlighted bit here. Yep, looks good. Click on OK. And a pivot table has been created in a new worksheet for us. Let's rename this tab immediately. We'll call it Pivot Table. And actually, I'm going to move this tab over so that data is always on the far left, because that's our kind of main tab, if you like. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. Now, what we have on the right hand side is we've got a list of our column headers, or variables, or fields as Excel calls them. Later on, we're going to use our pivot table quite a lot, and so we're going to look at a quick example now of how they can be used. Now we're going to take gender, we're going to drag and drop it into the rows box. We're also going to drop age bands into the columns box. And finally, we're going to scroll up and drop title into the values box and release it. Now, look at our pivot table. In an instant, Excel has told us how many males and females have taken part in Sugar-Free February. It's also told us how many from each age band have taken part in Sugar-Free Feb. Not only that, it's told us how many of each age and gender have taken part. So we've got 11 males, 18 to 25 out of our 2,000, 173 males, age 66 plus, 250 females, age 46 to 55, and so on. And if we'd rather see this as a percentage of our 2,000 rather than just as a number, we can right click, go to Show Values As, and click on Percentage of Grand Total. Now, at the moment, 2 decimal places is a bit unnecessary. Now, if we right click, change number formats, and get rid of our decimal places, that's much nicer to look at. So we can see that 13% of our participants were females aged 46 to 55. We can see that 10% were females aged 56 to 65, and so on. And there we have our first insight. Assuming that this group of 2,000 who took part in our survey is representative of everyone who took part in Sugar-Free Feb, the modal gender was female, the most common gender. The modal age group was 36 to 45. The vast majority of participants were aged 26 and above. The modal age and gender group was 36 to 45-year-old females, and so on. Our data is now pretty tidy and ready for us to do some analysis. Now the next few videos are going to talk about some of the A-level stats topics while showing you how to do the calculations and create the graphs to answer the questions you've chosen. Don't forget to save your work and head to the next video.